Hey, this is the King of the Mountain, Jeff Jarrett, the founder and president of Global Force Wrestling, and you're listening to the Pencil Podcast.
Hello, ladies. You're fired. Welcome to Raw is Jericho. Oh, let's get ready to suck it. You smell. And that's the bottom line.
I have a lot of things I want to get off my chest.
This is The Pencil, a professional wrestling podcast starring Renny D and friends. Thanks for listening to The Pencil. Subscribe to the show on iTunes and follow us on Twitter @Pencil Podcast.
What's up? Welcome into the Tank and Tire to another awesome episode of the Pencil Professional Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, professional wrestler Renny D. Sitting next to me in the tank is Travis Dirty Master, living the dream, Dirt.
Per usual. You and I sitting here, we're getting ready on a Tuesday night, and we got an exciting guest coming up the next 2 weeks. Talk about him a little bit. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I've been asked by quite a few people online via social media, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram even, and I even gotten text messages of where are the whereabouts of one Horace the Psychopath. He is a mainstay, a legend in Minnesota as far as independent wrestling goes, and not just Minnesota, but the Midwest in general. I mentioned on the podcast that my first memories of independent wrestling, my earliest memories were when I was 14 years old, and he was one of the first guys I've ever seen in independent wrestling. I had the honor of sharing the ring with him later on in my professional wrestling career. To this day, I consider it one of my favorite matches as far as how much fun I had in those matches, but on top of that, how good the matches actually were. We get into that. We do talk about the big incident in Minnesota independent wrestling. I believe that's actually on part 2. This is a 2-part episode with Horace. So part 1 will come up tonight. It's about an hour long. Part 2 will be another hour long, which we will release next Tuesday. So it's going to be good. I mean, you had a good time. We recorded on Friday.
He came live to the tank, which was very exciting. I think any future guests that we have, if we can get them here or we can get them in person, it just makes for a better dynamic, and I really like the opportunity he gave us. It was another couple hour long conversation that we break into a couple episodes. So the next couple weeks you're going to hear from Horace, who I think I called by the wrong name a couple times, didn't I?
You call him by his shoot name, whatever. It happens in this business, the podcast business. But before we go any further, guys, this is a fan and listener supported podcast. Go ahead and do us a huge favor. Rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, even on YouTube or on Stitcher Radio, and tell a friend via social media, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Vine, whatever it might be. Let's increase the listeners on this. We've been increasing each and every single week. We've been getting more and more popular. People enjoy the show. I think they like what we talk about for the most part, and if not, there's only a couple of people who give us some banter here and there. Otherwise, it seems like people are enjoying it, so that's good. We've been doing this for a while now. Last week, we had Jeff Jarrett from Global Force Wrestling, former 17-time World TNA champion, former WWE Intercontinental Champion and WWE European Champion. So if you have not checked out that episode, go over to pencilpodcast.com, download that episode via iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, whatever it might be. So we are also on Twitter. We are at Pencil Podcast. We're on Instagram at Pencil Podcast and on Facebook /Pencil Podcast. Dirt, you actually just joined Instagram.
I did. First time Instagrammer, is that the right word? I just added it on my phone. I got a new phone. I'm pretty excited about that.
I feel like if you add an R after whatever something is, it automatically becomes a word. Facebooker, Twitter, Instagram.
It's right? What I am. So I'm an Instagrammer. I'm at Travis Mester on there now.
Can we expect any pictures at Travis Mester on Instagram similar to the pictures that Seth Rollins?
Unlikely. I'm not a big dick picker, so is that also a word? I added ER, so it's got to be.
You can definitely add an R.
I'm going to do my best to follow the Pencil Podcast, and I'm going to follow a bunch of healthy eating and working out stuff. I hear there's good pictures on there to give me good motivation before I go to the gym.
Yeah, and we're going to get into our Body Guy Minute later, as you guys have let us know that you appreciate it. We got a good one for you tonight, so stay tuned for that too. Speaking of Seth Rollins, and we're going to talk a little bit about him, and I think it's safe to say that he had a pretty poor Valentine's Day. Even Dolph alluded to it on Raw. But overall, like, how was your weekend, dude? Like, I don't even believe in Valentine's Day, to be honest with you. I'll let you know what I did, because I think it's important for me to share what I did on that big hallmark of a holiday, because I think it's funny, and I think I'm going to get a lot of shit from people, and I think I deserve it. I think I really, truly deserve it. But if I don't tell you guys what I did on Valentine's Day, then I'm withholding important information from our listening audience, because our listening audience knows a lot about me when it comes to what I do inside of an 18x18 professional wrestling ring. But outside that, I haven't shed a lot of light on my personal life. So let me tell you, let me take you back through to my Valentine's Day on Saturday. Basically, just as far as the actual Valentine's Day itself goes, it was pretty, mundane. We went and got a hotel, me and my fiance. We spent our night as far as dinner. We didn't get fancy restaurant reservations, and I texted our statistician Ryan Drapes where I went for dinner, and I didn't get a text back. So Drapes, you're on probation. If you don't start communicating with the pencil, we will wish you the best in your future endeavors if we need to. But I went to Blaine Brook Bowling Alley and Bar for a nice romantic dinner.
I've been to Blaine Brook before. It is very romantic.
It's romantic. I think people are still allowed to smoke in there.
Yeah, if you like to smoke, chew, drink, bowl, or all of the above at the same time, Blaine Brook is where you want to be.
Blaine Brook Hotel, cool. Saturday was great. Here's what I did on Sunday. My birthday was back in February 1st. Instead of doing gifts this year, my girl decides to get me a massage, and I think, awesome. Your boy Queen, me, needs a massage. Why do I need a massage? Because I'm in the gym 5 days a week, beating myself up so I can look like a body guy, be a body guy, walk around, proclaim to be a body guy, and live the life of a body guy. But my body, dude, my body has been beat up. It's sore, taking bumps at Primetime Wrestling, and January didn't help. So we're about to go get this massage, and my girl goes to me. She goes, she touched my face or something, and I said, what the hell are you touching my face for? And she says, I'm just looking at it. I mean, would you ever decide, or would you ever get a facial? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm a man. Why the hell would I get a facial? I'm a body guy. Body guys don't get facials. And I said, no, I wouldn't get a facial. She drops this bomb on me. And I don't even know if I told you this yet, Dirt. So this might be the first time that I'm telling you this. Not only are we getting professional massages, we're getting professional facials. That's right, pencil audience. Your boy, Renny D, getting a professional facial.
How was it?
So first, my massage, she tells me a dude's giving me the massage. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Good. That's fine. I'm a big guy. I need somebody with strong hands. I don't care. I'm straight, but whatever. This guy's getting paid to do his job. I figured he can hit the pressure points. He can push hard. He's strong. The guy I got actually did like to lift. We talked about bodybuilding the entire massage, so it wasn't awkward because I didn't want to sit there in silence and have this guy rub his hands up and down my body. Massage was good. Massage was cool. The guy was cool. Whatever. The facial, shockingly, was pretty amazing. I mean, I'm a grown man. I'm 28. I weigh 195 pounds. I have calluses on my hands. My feet are dried over because that is what I do. I sat there on that chair, and this girl rubbed my face, lotion all over me. I don't know what else she put on me, but she took good care of me, and I actually enjoyed it. And I don't care what the listening audience says. Renny D got a facial from a chick, and it was fantastic.
There's a lot worse things you can do. If you had the massage first, I wouldn't be able to sign off my man card for just getting a facial on a Saturday. But if it's Valentine's Day and you're accompanying your significant other and you're getting a massage, I'm okay with it. Take any of that other stuff away, and if it's a Saturday in June and you're going by yourself, I got a serious issue with the facial. But I'm not against it for one weekend once a year.
If it makes me any more of a man, I didn't shave before I went and got the facial. I had scrub. I had stubble. Although my girl asked me to shave, and I said, I ain't shaving. I didn't even put two and two together. And I asked the girl who gave me a facial, sorry, I didn't shave. And she said it's completely fine. So at least I still had that little bit of manhood going for me.
I got to imagine that the girl who gave you the facial, it's great to even say that. The girl that gave you the facial it's probably not the first time that there's been a guy brought there that didn't know he was coming. So I'm sure it's acceptable.
I mean, what you just said, you could really take that a lot of different ways.
You could take that a lot of ways. I
did ask her.
What I mean is that he did not anticipate to be going to get a facial whenever his girl took him. You're probably not the first guy that she's had do that, so I'm sure she's had the facial hair situation.
Well, she did mention to me, I asked her, I go, how many dudes sit in this chair? And she goes, to be honest with you, not very many. And right then and there, I thought, well, son of a bitch, okay. She says, normally guys, when they come in here for a wax. Their back to get waxed. I immediately thought of Ari Daivari because he needs his back waxed because he's Iranian or Persian or whatever he is, and he's just one of the hairiest men I've ever seen in professional wrestling. John Johnson. I've seen John Johnson shave his back before in the locker room. But I thought, and here's another thing, then I'll let you kind of take over. But what the masseuse said to me is this guy is a decent looking guy. He's in shape. He does a bunch of cardio, which obviously I'm not a huge fan of. But he says to me, I'm jealous that I can't get as big as you, unquote. And then he also said to me, and I don't know if you take this a little weird, as he's rubbing my back, he goes, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. And immediately my thought goes, well,
I'm going to take this the wrong way.
I'm going to take this the wrong way. And he says, it's really nice and refreshing when somebody that's in here is in shape, because when you massage them, you can feel their muscles actually release, unlike majority of the people that I sit here and do this with, they're out of shape and gross looking. Unquote. So I mean, do you take that as a compliment? I mean, he's telling me that I'm a body guy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a perfect stranger that hadn't met you for more than 20 minutes. Yeah, that's got to feel good. You got to be happy about that. I would be.
So that was my day, and I want to hear your feedback. If you're listening out there, shoot us a Twitter at Pencil Podcast, at Real Renny D, whatever. Give me hell, make fun of me. If you've ever gotten the facial and you're a dude, I want to hear about it. I want to hear if you liked it, because you just said if I went at a random day in June and got one, you judge me. I'm not going to say that I won't do that. I can't tell you right here, right now, on this podcast that I won't someday pick up the cellular telephone and say, hey, what does a man got to do? How much money do I have to pay to get another facial?
I respect it. I hope that you let us know when you do it. I mean, maybe I'll try it one day. I'm not saying I won't.
I think that you should. I think that you need to try it. I think that this just happened. Now I'm telling you about it, and that way you can share your experiences. I think I want to do more of this on the Pencil. We talk about pro wrestling, and we're going to talk about pro wrestling, but I think some of the stuff that you and I do in our personal lives is very entertaining. Some of the stuff we can share, some of the stuff we'd rather not. But with that being said, I slept until 11. I went to the gym on Saturday, and then I got home from the gym, and I took about a 45-minute cat nap, and then I drank whiskey and 7-Up until I fell asleep. So today is the greatest basketball player in the history of NBA birthday, Michael Jordan. I don't know if he's like 75 years old now or whatever he is, but it's his birthday today. The NBA All-Star Game was this week, and then on Saturday night, on Valentine's Day, they had the three-point competition, they had the dunk competition, and most importantly, they had the skills competition. And why do I say most importantly they had the skills competition? Because my boy Chris Bosh of the Miami Heat did something that you don't see happen. He three-peated. He did something 3 times. Do you know how hard it is to do something 3 times?
Very hard.
It's extremely difficult. Now, granted, he did it over a 3-year period, back to back to back, but if you can pull something off back to back to back, that is impressive. I don't care who you are. You got to give people credit.
All on the same day.
All on the same. It's impressive, and you got to do what you got to do. And I know Sunday, was it Sunday we watched the SNL special? Is that what we're doing? We're just hanging out watching the SNL special. So I think we had a pretty laid-back weekend, probably like Dolph said, probably better than Seth Rollins, but that's good. And I guess if we're going to kind of transition into pro wrestling, I don't really have a good segue into pro wrestling, but I do have breaking news. As of today, a 10-year veteran of Total Nonstop Action, Impact Wrestling, Samoa Joe decided to leave the company. And we don't talk TNA a lot on this show. Another reason is we still don't have Destination America, but
we'll get there.
We'll get there. Samoa Joe leaves the company after 10 years. That's a big loss for that company because I think he's more of a locker room general. Now, they lost Bully Ray, and now they lost Samoa Joe. Big loss for TNA, minor loss for TNA.
That's a big loss for TNA. Samoa Joe is probably not a guy that they're going to be putting their heavyweight belt on anytime, but I would put him in the realm of a guy like he's probably at the same point in TNA as like a Ziggler is in the WWE, and they
Samoa
don't want
Joe?
to be. Yeah, they don't want to be
better than Ziggler. As far as like historical wise,
yeah.
He was there with AJ Styles and Jeff Jarrett before Jeff decided to go elsewhere. I mean, he was one of the first guys on contract for TNA.
Yeah, it's a bad loss, but
here's what you do with him: you bring him to NXT and you make the guys down there better. He's not making it on WWE television, so either he's going to go to the Indies and make a living there, he's going to call it quits, or he could potentially still work with WWE. Now, the reason why I bring it up is Rhino, which we all know who Rhino is, made an appearance at an NXT house show, or maybe it was a live event that they're taping.
Yep.
And he went against Finn Balor, I believe it was.
Yep.
So I think that what they're doing down in NXT, what Triple H is doing, is he's bringing in these guys who are veterans of the business, like a Rhino, potentially now a Samoa Joe, somebody else, to work the guys who are awesome. Finn Balor has worked the indie scene for 10 years. He knows how to work. But you can bring in another veteran that can help those kids get better and get to the main roster quicker, because WWE needs a return on their investment in these guys. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Finn Balor, Hideo Itami, if I pronounce it right, Hideo Itami, Kenta. I mean, you got these guys making minimal money in NXT. When they call them up to the main roster, they're not increasing their pay. They are still on an NXT contract, so if you can make money off the NXT contract guys on the main roster, I think you need to do it.
That's a smart business move.
It is a smart business move, and that's exactly what they need to do. We were watching the NXT special when we were taping with Horace. You got a chance to catch some of it finally. What were your overall thoughts on some of the stuff that you saw?
I liked the Neville and Finn Balor match was pretty sweet. I thought the main event was very surprising for what I anticipated it to be. I read about the results before I watched them, so I was surprised when I read the results, and even after reading what happened with Kevin Owens, I was surprised. It was a very good match. I was just surprised how it ended. I know you thought you were too, I believe.
Yeah, it was different. Again, they kept referring to it on the broadcast as what Brock Lesnar did to John Cena at SummerSlam.
I didn't see that.
No,
that comparison.
I don't see it either. I thought it was very different how they ended the match, because you saw the moonsault where he hit his head on the ramp.
Yep.
Whether it was a work or a shoot, whatever it was. If that was the point in the match where they got something whispered in through the headset, say, "Hey, sell that injury now. At this point, you're going, whatever." They did a good job on the fly. Is Kevin Owens now? I'm going to take a lot of flack for this, I think, from people listening. I still don't see Kevin Owens as a main roster talent, because I don't think he has a main roster look.
I agree. I don't think that. I mean, a month ago, I believe I probably said Baron Corbin was my guy from NXT that I thought would be.
He still looks like the most.
I thought would be the most WWE TV ready. I don't know if I would still say that, but
his talent's not there, but his look is there. He looks phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that's more than half the battle sometimes. So I don't think that anybody else has really stood up to the point where I think even Finn Balor. I don't think that there's guys that I would transition to Monday night today and think that it's going to be a success, because of either their gimmick or the fact that I don't know what else that they can do other than really put on a good 15-minute match, and how many of those are on Monday nights?
Yeah, not very many, which you read
That's neither here nor that's probably more of a complaint than anything else.
And you hear the reports that the WWE talent are mad because they're not giving time on TV. I don't know if these reports are true or not, but they get time at house shows to work their craft. You got to understand, on TV, there's breaks, there's all these different points you need to get to. You're not going to be given 15, 20, 30 minutes matches on Raw, maybe SmackDown, but not so much Raw, because it's highly watched, and you got to kind of. And the thing goes back to the typical WWE fan is not your typical NXT fan. What they watch on Monday nights, the audience there is, I would say, they're drawing 4 million people in on Monday nights. There is 1 million total subscribers to the network. So there is 25% that are in the
people
audience,
like us.
that are like us. 75% don't care about wrestling enough to purchase the network for $10 a month. So you can't give them 30-minute matches on Raw as much as you want to, as much as we want to see it. It's not going to happen, because the attention spans of us as viewers is so short. How many times, Dirt, do you watch Monday Night Raw? Even when a good match is on, do you look at your cell phone?
Very, very often. Every single match, I would say. Every single segment, I'm looking at other stuff, or I'm looking at my fish tank, or I'm eating. I'm not sitting there watching 35-minute matches consistently, so maybe I'm a bit of a hypocrite whenever I say that that's what I would want to.
And I'm the same way. I look at my phone a lot. I try to pay attention as much as possible. Sometimes things aren't appealing to me, but I know I need to put that damn cell phone down. I need to watch, because we talk about it every week.
That being said, I would still say that I would take a 12 to 15 minute match 5 or 6 times a night if a storyline was good to go with it. And that's the part that lacks too much in my mind. So even if you bring Finn Balor up or you bring whoever, Kevin Owens up, if the storyline sucks, they're going to be Adam Rose in 3 months.
Yeah, Adam Rose, Fandango, the Ascension, the New Day. You can just pick a lot of talents that have they've been given opportunities. Let's not kid ourselves. These guys have been given every opportunity in the book to get over. Fandango, Adam Rose, the Ascension, they've all had pay-per-view matches, or they've all had talking time on Raw. They're just not getting over. Whose fault is that? Is it the WWE's fault for pushing them, or is it the talent's fault for not relating to the fans?
Both.
Yeah.
And is it whoever's clamoring for these guys to get up there? Remember that whenever they get there, and you better be there to cheer them, and you better be there to boo them, no matter what kind of character they are, or else they're going to be embarrassed in 6 weeks.
So we're on the subject of storylines. Let's go ahead and now segue into Raw. Most intriguing takeaway from Raw, was it Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns final segment, or was it the Triple H Ric Flair segment?
I think the Roman Reigns finish was the most intriguing and the biggest improvement that I saw. I think they needed that finish, and they needed that mini little segment during Reigns' match with Daniel Bryan annoying him with the yes chants, and during Daniel Bryan's match, Reigns putting himself over by taking pictures and being ringside with the fans. I think that was more than what they've done previously. What they did on SmackDown last week with the tag team turmoil to show that they're either annoyed with each other or gaining each other's respect, and then last night at least has me more interested in what's going to happen Sunday at Fast Lane, even if I still don't think the end is in any sort of doubt.
I think you really have to take Fast Lane and not use it as a throwaway pay-per-view. You're having, again, and we've touched on this in the past when I think they had Survivor Series for free on the network. Now you have Fast Lane for free for new subscribers. I think their goal is to have these people sign up for the network, watch Fast Lane, see Sting for free, or just completely forget that they signed up for it, and now they have them on the hook month to month. How many times, and maybe you're not the same way, but we both have Sirius XM radio, right? Like, we both pay for satellite radio. To be honest with you, it's probably the dumbest thing that we do.
Correct.
But is it the fact that we forget to, and we listen to it though, so people who have the network might not watch it all the time, but do we just sit there? We've said before, we're going to cancel it today. We're going to call and cancel it, and we just never do.
Everybody pays 90% of their bills these days with automatic transfer, and if you just see $9 come out at the end of every month, just like it does every other month.
Or not even see it. How many people actually check their statements?
Yep, exactly. So if you can get people signed up and set up with automatic withdrawals, you're going to be set for at least 60% of those people to hang on for 6 to 12 months, more than likely.
Give that stuff away for free. I don't care if it's for new subscribers, and get them tricked in. They're tricking them into the network. But again, you're using Fastlane as a stepping stone to Mania. I don't think you use it as a throwaway pay-per-view. I think you give them an entertaining show. Sting Triple H will be intriguing. It's going to set up the match at WrestleMania. Sting's got limited dates. Do they have a contract signing on Sunday? Is that what they're using it for? Or are they going to go ahead and have a confrontation that leads to a contract signing on a Raw that leads to their match at WrestleMania?
I don't see them signing any contract until maybe the go-home show of WrestleMania, two episodes before WrestleMania. It's just going to be a face-to-face. Hopefully Sting talks. I don't know if that'll be giving away too much, but it would be great to hear him respond to what Triple H said last night. I thought Triple H's promo was good and pretty blatantly honest for what he actually probably felt 15 years ago and what he probably feels now about a WCW guy being a WCW guy. And Triple H, I mean, you can argue a lot of guys to be WWE, and maybe The Undertaker would be the one you could put over Triple H, but who else are you saying has been WWE for the last 18 years other than Triple H?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Triple H did work in WCW shortly, but I would say Undertaker, John Cena, Shawn Michaels. Like, those three have been strictly WWE. They never went elsewhere either. But Triple H, and one thing he said that makes him hard to dislike is that he said he lives, breathes, and dies for the WWE. If anybody tries to take that away from him, that he would kick their ass, do whatever it is. So he is fighting for the WWE. I don't think you can't pin WWE versus WCW in this match. It doesn't work.
It's really tough because he's such a heel on TV, and like Sting's going to be the face of this match. It is an interesting perspective how they're going about it, but you're not going to bring Sting in as a heel, so this is what they're dealt. It's just. Do
you like the WCW versus WWE spin on it, or do you think that the age of the audience nowadays?
I think
some of them don't know WCW.
Yeah, I just think like we, meaning you and I and people that watch it as much as we do, we're too smart for them to play that card last night of, oh, Ric Flair's going to come out and say, don't let Sting take you by surprise because time off is the worst thing you could have as a wrestler to Triple H. Whereas, like, Triple H is then playing up, oh, it's been 14 years since you've been in WCW, and then he just doesn't mention the rest of his career. So they're just ignoring the last 14 years of Sting's career.
Which was TNA.
Correct. And Ric Flair's trying to play up that Triple H has too much time off. And you can say what you want about Triple H, but he can take a year off, 2 years off, and he can still go in the ring. So I'm more afraid. Ric Flair was playing off Triple H needing to be ready for Sting. I think I'm more concerned the other way around.
It'll be an interesting little segment on Fastlane. I hope there's some time there. And we always complain about promos being too long. I think that whatever they do needs to have some time invested into it, especially if you're having this blow-off thing at Mania. Bray Wyatt's cryptic promos, really good, really cool. I appreciate the fact that they're not having him work. I appreciate the fact that he's not wrestling at Fastlane. I think you need to save him. If he's working the Undertaker, which I think all signs are pointing to that. And last night... If
he's not, it's going to be really disappointing.
Yeah, it'd be terrible. But if he's got the nail, he's pounding the nail into something. And I told you this, I think last night we were watching, if it's a casket match, I'm going to be very upset because they just had a casket match on SmackDown for Kane and Daniel Bryan. Why have that match if they're going to have this WrestleMania casket match? So I don't think it's going to be a casket match, and if it is, I think it's a mistake just because of what they just did. I don't know, and I think we talked about this last week or maybe the week before, how good that match actually will be, but I think that the interaction between The Undertaker and Bray Wyatt leading up to WrestleMania could be very, very, very fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it could be the best lead up to WrestleMania since Undertaker faced Punk. And it'll be interesting to see if Undertaker can go, and they might need to make it one of those walk-around matches like he had with Brock Lesnar, basically. Keep the contact to a minimum, make it all about the characters. And if they do that, I think they can get through a 20-minute match and have it successful. I'm just interested to see if it's going to be a put Bray Wyatt over and all of a sudden have him beat The Undertaker and have that be The Undertaker's last match, or if this is just a let's get Undertaker a victory and have him go out on top, and hopefully Bray Wyatt can get over in this at the same time.
Completely agree. We'll see. We got one pay-per-view on Sunday, and then we got 4 weeks until WrestleMania. So
it's going to be a big 4 weeks.
We're there. So what we're going to do real quick here is we're going to go ahead and do our Body Guy Minute, I think. We'll do our Body Guy Minute here, and then we'll go ahead and do our predictions for Fastlane, and then we'll kind of spin over to Horace if that works for you.
That works for me.
Awesome. Well, this week's, whatever you want to call it, Body Guy Minute is brought to you by iForce Nutrition. They are the official sponsor of the Pencil, the Professional Wrestling Podcast. Right now, go to iForceNutrition.com. Find any products that you want that you think will work, and I will tell you which ones will work and which ones are good. But if you type in promo code PENCIL30, you'll receive 30% off your order, which then will take it down below bodybuilding.com, Supplement Warehouse, or wherever you shop. It'll be cheaper. Plus, their shipping is a flat rate, $5.95. I recommend, and tonight I had a huge arm day, huge arm day. I recommend Hemavol, which I've mentioned before on this. It's a nitric oxide booster. It just allows you to go longer, harder, faster, stronger. And Dirt, I think you can agree.
That's what guys want to do. They want to go harder, they want to go longer and go faster and get facials.
And get facials. And we were debating what we wanted to talk about on the Body Guy Minute, and when you got home, we kind of talked about a subject. Initially I wanted to talk about how to get your calves bigger, because I think that's a thing that a lot of dudes could use.
That's true. I had leg day today. Thank you, Ken Anderson. I had a Ken Anderson leg day, and We were going to talk about calves, but I think we might leave that for a later episode. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
we're going to leave that for a later episode. I am going to go ahead and tell you that I enjoy it, hearing success stories. I enjoy hearing how people work out, except for CrossFit. But if you're getting up and you're doing something, good for you. Good for you. You're off the couch. You're not sitting there guzzling beer, getting fat, looking like crap. But when it's 5 o'clock at night in the gym, when people are getting off of work, and you think it's okay to do circuit training on the most popular equipment in the gym, now I have a problem.
If you want to do circuit training, set up some weights, set up some body weight exercises, and go into your garage and do circuit training, but don't do it over the 5 to 7 o'clock at night range, or even just before work whenever there's 150 people in the gym. Don't take up 4 machines. It only pisses other people off.
Pissed off. Tonight I try to go ahead and do dips on this machine, and I set my drink down. I'm about to sit down. The guy swoops in, does something, goes and does something else. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? First off, I'm bigger than you. Second off, don't sit here and do 4 or 5 different pieces of equipment on a Tuesday night at 5:20 in the evening.
If you want to do that, go to the gym at 4:50 in the morning when there might not be many people there, or 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Circuit train your fucking ass off. But I'm not down for that pre-dinner time, right after work, circuit training. If you can do something, and you can circuit train at home, or maybe whenever you go to the gym, just understand that you're not the only one in there. Everybody wants to look good.
There's only one other, and actually circuit training, that pisses me off more than anything. But I saw some guy bring his laptop to the gym, sitting down in the corner doing P90X at the gym.
I've seen that before.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Is it because you want to be around other people who are working out and feel special?
You have a gym membership and you have a computer. No doubt you have the cash to have a TV and a DVD player.
Here's the deal. Those that and if you guys are going to give me shit for this, that's fine. Those of you who do Insanity, do P90X, you do it because you say it's convenient. You say it's cheaper. I say it's because you don't want to get your ass to a gym and lift weights. Am I wrong?
I've done P90X.
Yeah,
when I did it, I was doing it because of the plyometrics and because of the yoga that I never really did before. I haven't done it in like 3 years now, but I think I would do it again. And if I did it again, I wouldn't be doing it on a laptop in a gym.
Absolutely.
I would still be going to the gym.
And if you're gonna do yoga, then we gotta do DDP yoga, right?
Correct.
And that's what you do. All right, so that's the Body Guy Minute. iForceNutrition.com. Promo code Pencil30, 30% off your order. They do kick back 10% here to the show. Help us out. Pay those gimmicks that we have called bills on the show. Fast Lane 2015, first WWE pay-per-view, new pay-per-view, I guess I should say, of the year. First new pay-per-view in quite a while, actually. So I have the card in front of me. You still owe me a bottle after the last show. We're knotted up at 3-3. We've been doing this 6 months. This will be our 7th pay-per-view predictions. Let's start right away. The United States Championship match. Rusev defends his U.S. title against John Cena.
John Cena by disqualification, somehow count out something stupid. I don't think that Rusev will lose, and I don't think he'll lose the title, but I think John Cena will be announced the victor.
That's a good pick, actually, because Rusev's walking out with the title.
Correct.
I don't know how he's walking out with the title. You brought up a very good point as far as a disqualification. I even can see this as being like a double count out, something like that. But if John Cena wins via disqualification or just wins the match, because you picked John Cena to go over, you'll win that match. I'll go against the grain and have Rusev going over John Cena. I don't know how, if it's a double count out, technically it's a double count out. I guess it's a smash at that point. Yeah. So, next match here is the Divas title. Nikki Bella versus Paige, which, do you think Paige will wear clothes on Sunday, or do you think she'll kind of do the towel thing?
I think Paige will have on her normal attire. I assume that was a one-night thing to have her in a ballerina's outfit. But in that match, I will say, first off, I would like it for not to have 2 of the 5 titles on the show. There's 5 titles, right?
Well, yeah.
U.S. Intercontinental.
U.S. Intercontinental, Divas, Tag.
There's in World Heavyweight. So there's 5 titles, and right now 2 of them are completely determined by Total Divas, and that's garbage. But neither here nor there. I will say that Nikki Bella retains.
I do too. Nikki Bella retains that, keeps her title. Speaking of the Intercontinental title, the contract signing, which was funny. Wade Barrett versus Dean Ambrose on Sunday. I think Wade Barrett will retain on Sunday. I think that there's a payoff at WrestleMania for Dean Ambrose somewhere down the line.
I got Dean Ambrose taking the Intercontinental title into WrestleMania, so I think he will be defending the title at the Showcase, and he'll be beating BNB on Sunday.
All right. Tag team title match. Usos defending their title against the Masters of the Universe. Actually, my new favorite tag team. Cesaro and Tyson Kidd.
The Tyson Kidd's been doing great work.
They're both great.
Yeah, Cesaro, I mean, he's just kind of there, but Tyson Kidd's character's carrying that team. They're not going to win on Sunday. The Usos are retaining, but they're entertaining. Usos
do retain, correct, on that one. And then it brings us to our main event, Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan. The winner of that match goes on to face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 31 in San Francisco, California. There's been rumblings. There's been talk that it potentially could be a triple threat match. Who walks out of Fast Lane and who walks into WrestleMania challenging for the World Heavyweight Championship?
Roman Reigns.
Roman Reigns is my pick as well. So
I think that it's most likely going to end with them doing their very best to have Bryan as over as possible by the end of the show, to then have him shake his hand, give him a hug, give him a good luck. Just try to give him as big of a rub as he possibly can, because after Sunday, he's got 4 weeks and the beast waiting for him, and he better be over by then, because if he's not, it's going to be tough to correct it.
Very tough to correct it. So the ones that we differ on is the Intercontinental Championship match. You've taken Dean Ambrose. I've got Wade Barrett. And then we differ on the U.S. title match. I got Rusev. You got John Cena somehow, someway. Doesn't mean John Cena's walking out with the title, but you got John Cena getting his hand raised, whether it be via disqualification or whatever it might be. Any final thoughts going into Sunday's pay-per-view? Anything that you're kind of looking... What's the one thing that you're looking forward to the most?
I'm looking forward to, I assume, SmackDown this week they'll announce Ziggler versus Rollins, probably.
Yeah, should we pick that now, just in case?
I assume that'll be announced.
Well, they're wrestling each other.
They're wrestling tonight on Main Event, or tomorrow night.
What's Main Event?
I think maybe SmackDown.
No, it's got to be SmackDown because Main Event's on the network right now because of the issue. So it's either going to be that 6-man tag between Seth Rollins and J&J Security versus Dolph Ziggler, Eric Rowan, and Ryback, which I think makes more sense.
Yes, one of those matches is going to happen. We just don't know which.
Well,
one
let's pick that
yet.
Team Ziggler, Team Rollins, whether it be a one-on-one or a team. Who do you got in that?
Ryback, Rowan, and Ziggler would win that match if it happens. I'm excited to see if there's anything to do with Sheamus or Randy Orton at any point. We know they're coming back. I'm excited to see when it is. Maybe it'll be at a pay-per-view event when they're giving it away for free. Otherwise, I would hope next week's Raw tells us something.
Awesome. And I'm going to take Seth Rollins' team in that match just to be different from you. So let's go with that. That's good. We're going to wrap this up so we can get you guys over to part 1 with Horace the Psychopath, talking about his professional wrestling career, the life in professional wrestling. Dude's been around for like 25 years. He's wrestled all over the Midwest. He's wrestled for Vince in the WWF. He's wrestled down for USWA, Jerry Lawler's promotion, which we've touched on that. Travis is at Travis Mester on Twitter, also at Travis Mester now on Instagram. I am at Real Renny D. This show's at Pencil Podcast, pencilpodcast.com. It is also at Pencil Podcast on Instagram and /Pencil Podcast on Facebook. Rate, review, subscribe, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube every Tuesday right here, free of charge, pencilpodcast.com. Sit down, strap up, strap in, whatever you want to do. The Freak, the Psycho, Horace, coming up next.
Hello, Pencil Podcast listeners. This is Chris from Spot Monkey Media. Now, if you're a professional wrestler, a promoter, or even a business owner, and you need someone to design your next t-shirt, event poster, 8x10, business cards, anything you need, Spot Monkey Media is graphic design for the wrestling professional. Go to spotmonkeymedia.com, send me an email, message me on Facebook, tweet me, Snapchat me your junk, anything you need. Spot Monkey Media. Create your legacy.
Hey, this is Chris Jericho. You're listening to The Pencil with Renny D. Pencil, baby. He's a pencil. Yeah, boy.
We are here in the tank in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. It's me, my boy Dirt, and a man I first saw wrestle when I was 14 years old. Sean's Bases Loaded, somewhere near Wausau, Wisconsin, for I believe it was All American Wrestling, Jim Gagne, Mr. Horace the Psychopath.
Yes, sir. The glory days of the AAW.
But that's all I like. I didn't know what independent wrestling was at all. I grew up on WWE or WWF at the time, WCW, the Monday Night Wars. I heard a radio ad one time on the radio, obviously, for ringside seats for AAW wrestling, and Sean's Bases Loaded in Wausau, Wisconsin. I thought, well, shit, I'm 14 years old. I want to be a pro wrestler. This is going to be the closest I'll ever get to a ring. I went there, and there are two guys I remember from that show. One was Tony DiNucci, whatever. The other was you, and you were memorable because you had a gimmick, and that gimmick was exactly who you've been for ever.
23 years.
23 years.
23 plus.
Did you imagine 23 years ago what the professional wrestling business actually would be and become?
Absolutely not. When I got in the business, lifelong fan from the time I was 6. All I ever knew I wanted to do was be a pro wrestler and have a pro wrestling match. So I really took pro wrestling literally one show at a time, one day at a time, and wrestling has evolved so much from when I broke in 91. And I mean, sometimes I'm just in complete awe of where the product is at now, in a good way. I much prefer this product. And I wish when I broke into the business, the level of athleticism and quote unquote work rate was what it is now. Because you go back and watch wrestling from 20 years ago, it doesn't even look like pro wrestling of today. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
We've heard on this podcast the man sitting next to me, Renny D, explain how terrible he was when he started wrestling. What were you like your first match?
Solid.
Oh, Jesus.
Solid. Better than Ryan.
Solid. I remember a lot of people telling me at the beginning that I was a natural and that I had very good timing for somebody who was really new in the business. But I took that in stride, never was really cocky about it because I figured I'd been wrestling invisible guys in my backyard, in my bedroom, for the better part of 12 years. So to me, once I got in the business, it was just more a matter of I actually had a partner to do all the things I've been doing for since I was 6 to invisible people.
You always need that dance partner.
Here's my question, though, Horace. Like, you just said that you like the way the business is today, or the work ethic that the guys have today. There are so many guys, especially being here in Minnesota, with the old AWA guys, and they come in and they preach all the time. Back in my day, and there's guys like me and guys like Arya, who you know, or Craven, whoever it might be on the indie scene who's younger, that at some point, not to be disrespectful, but we get kind of tired of hearing that back in my day because it's not 1980 anymore. It is 2015. And to hear you say that you like the way the product is nowadays, I don't say surprises me, but I guess I'm a little taken back by it because you're an old school guy in pro wrestling. Why do you like what would you say to those AWA guys who say wrestling was in its heyday when I wrestled? That's pro wrestling. What's on TV now or what I see now at indie shows is complete shit.
Different product, different audience, for for good or bad, depending upon, what side of the coin you're on. For me, breaking into the business, a lot of the wrestling I grew up on was really boring, just straight out boring. And I think the modern day of wrestling, there's just so much action. Sometimes it's almost too extreme and too much, but as a fan, I want to watch a lot of action. And so the modern day pro wrestling for me as a fan, forget being in the business and being a professional wrestler, as a fan, I would rather watch today's product than the product that I grew up on.
As a wrestler, which is a complete 180, would you rather have wrestling the way it was when you first started or the way it is now? Because the way it is now, when we go out there and do a match, there is a lot of work and there's a lot of thought that has to go into what we're doing because we can't just go out, grab a headlock for 5 minutes, shoot you off the ropes 1 or 2 times in the match, and call it a night. Those days are gone and over with. And if they put that match on TV today, it would be Travis. Would you watch that? Would you enjoy that match?
I would enjoy that match at 0%. I would hate that match most likely.
So, and that's the problem.
Coming from somebody who's never been between the four ropes or four corners, as Antonio Cesaro would put it. Other than last week, I suppose, whenever I took my first bump. But no, I wouldn't be interested in that at all.
But I can imagine, as a wrestler, back in those days or back in those AWA days, it'd be a lot easier on us because we wouldn't have to work as hard, I guess, do a lot less. So as a worker, or as a wrestler, we'll use that term, what do you prefer?
Well, I think the separation is the athletes, the pro wrestlers of the modern era, the athleticism between them and the wrestlers of 25 years ago, it's no contest. The athletes of today are far superior athletes. And that's the part I prefer, because I mean the guys in the business now, man, holy cow! I mean they are absolute phenomenal athletes, not just great pro wrestlers, but phenomenal athletes. I will say that the wrestling that I grew up on, though, and what was probably better about the wrestling I grew up on was guys back when I was growing up, and everybody could cut a promo. They knew how to talk. Everybody knew what their character was, quote unquote. Their gimmick, when I grew up, was called a gimmick, not a character. Everybody knew what their gimmick was. It was very defined, and guys played their gimmick. And I would also say that the wrestling I grew up on, guys look like pro wrestlers. And again, it's a very subjective argument these days. But when I grew up watching wrestling, everybody was 6 foot, for the most part, 6 foot plus and 240, 250, 260, legit plus. And the modern day pro wrestler, I mean, you know, half these rosters, guys aren't even, you know,
they had a couple inches in their boots.
Yeah, and aren't even, you know, a legit 220. And again, that's a completely subjective preference as far as you as a fan.
You speak a little bit about keeping your gimmick long term. It seems to me keeping the Horace the Psychopath gimmick that you apparently have had for years and years and years, it sounds like.
Yep.
How many people do you know? Just because watching from afar now, there's so many gimmick changes. There's so many guys who come in and there's somebody, and then there's somebody different in 2 years, and there's somebody completely different 5 years after that. How many guys do you know that did what you did and were the same guy when they were 26 as they are when they're 41 or whatever it might be?
Undertaker?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's far and few between. And big part of that, though, I mean, in defense of the gimmick changes is, again, the wrestling of 25 years ago, you had one 1 hour show, your promotion, usually an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. And you didn't have to put out the amount of content that is now required in pro wrestling. Fans see you a lot more often. And
they get sick of you a lot quicker.
Absolutely. So that kind of puts you in a position where, you know, you might take a harder look at what you're doing and thinking of evolving your gimmick or changing it altogether based off of your appearances on TV. So I think that's why you get so much turnover in gimmicks.
I want to kind of take it back real quick because you just mentioned when you watched wrestling or when you were a fan of wrestling, the guys were 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 270. The guys now are guys like me, 5'8", 190, 200. And I actually am more of a fan of the guys who are 6'6", 270. And I'm the guy that's trying to make it in the business, or at least was at one point, and I'm not that. And so, but at the end of the day, if I'm a fan, though, I would much rather, and there are going to be people who disagree with me, Daniel Bryan is 5'9", 180, 185, awesome professional wrestler.
185 soaking wet.
I would rather watch in a wrestling ring a Roman Reigns who is 6'6", 250, that's got that look of a man's man. So I don't blame the WWE or TNA or whoever for looking for these big football players. I never once am I that guy that's sour about a guy making it in the business that didn't put in their dues like we did. Do you have any problem whatsoever with guys now who maybe played 4 years of football at Oklahoma State, like a Jack Swagger, and he gets a contract on TV, never once paid his dues like you didn't pay his dues like I did, but now he's on TV and he's a semi-okay, whatever you want to call him, but I mean, he's not nearly as good as half the people that you and I would have seen on a weekend basis throughout Minnesota.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the product, I think as a fan, long term, you're going to draw a lot more fans with bigger guys. And I think if you need any more proof of that, you just look at MMA. The biggest pay-per-view buy rates in MMA are when the heavyweights and the middleweights fight, correct?
There's a reason that the heavyweight championship of the world is the biggest belt in every production that you can find. There's the welterweight belt, the light heavyweight belt are all great, but when you turn on your video game, who do you choose to wrestle with?
And that's the absolute truth. Size will always prevail.
You can't teach 7 feet, 300 pounds.
Absolutely, and I still believe people that want to invest time in their money, if they're a novice, casual fan of any sport, they want to root for people who they would like to be like. And most males, I would argue, would love to be 6'2", 6'3", 250 and be able to kill somebody.
And we're not here saying that last year wasn't great with Daniel Bryan. We loved it. We were in attendance. It was awesome. But you don't do that 12 months a year for 10 years in a row. There's a reason that Brock Lesnar's there. There's a reason that the big guys, there's a reason that Ryback gets a push. Would you say Ryback's the best wrestler you've ever seen? But he looks fucking great.
Absolutely.
There's a reason for things like that. You want to go, and sometimes you don't want to cheer for the guy that you see walking around the supermarket. You want to cheer for the guy that you wish you could look like you said.
I'm actually, I'm sitting here thinking about all the things I want to ask you, because you and I have shared the ring twice only in our professional careers, but at the end of the day, I remember you when I was 14. I got into the business when I was 16. You pulled me aside for the first time ever and gave me my first piece of advice outside of the people of my training circle, which was, Renny, quit taking fucking bumps on your head. I'll never forget it. It was in Merrill, Wisconsin. Did this move to Bobby Valentino, who's in Milwaukee, and you pulled us aside and said, you guys don't need to do that. And at that point, when I was thinking pro wrestling, I was thinking I need to go out there and do some fucking cool moves. I've never once in my life did a backflip, and I never will. I don't want to, but like these are what I'm thinking. I think I need to do all these spots and look awesome. But you kind of said to me, you don't need to do these things. And I think you might remember this. It was actually your going away party, right? In Merrill, Wisconsin, out in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. Do you remember this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, you were very instrumental in my life and my career as far as 14, I saw you. This guy's got face paint on. I was like, Jesus, this guy's a real deal. 16, I started wrestling. Met you, and I was like 16 and a half finally for the first time. And you were always nice to me. And you didn't have to be at all. And I'm always curious to why a guy like you who spent all this time in the business would take time out of your professional career at this point. And I didn't even ask you for advice because at that point I didn't know that was the proper thing to do. I didn't know politics in business, in the wrestling business, but you took the time to pull me aside and give me advice. Have you always done that? You know, looked at the young talent and said, I could help that kid, or I could help this guy, or were there certain people that you kind of picked out, or how did you approach the quote-unquote green kids in pro wrestling to try to give advice that you could give them?
I would always watch the matches on the show. I try to, especially the newer guys. Just kind of wanted to see what they were about, and I always felt like I could always tell the guys who really wanted to be in pro wrestling and the guys that really wanted to advance. And it wasn't even a thing of somebody having to say something. You could just tell. And I know that when I thought I met you in Eau Claire, but
you may have. There was a show in Eau Claire in a sand pit, like a volleyball court. We may have met there. That's the only show I remember besides the heavy show. Happened 2 years ago that I wrestled actually in the city of Eau Claire.
I just remember when I first met you, wherever it was, it's been a while, I just remember thinking that kid wants it. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that want to be pro wrestlers, but they want it for the wrong reasons.
Right.
I think the guys who want it for the right reasons, it's far and few between. And I think for me, every so often, as in your case, I mean, I obviously saw something that I was like, this kid, he wants to be a legit pro wrestler. And I think you were also approachable. There's a lot of guys in pro wrestling at no matter what skill level just aren't approachable and don't want to hear somebody's advice. And you definitely came across to me as somebody that wanted to learn, was hoping to get any piece of advice you could, and somebody who would actually take that advice and digest it. So
do you think, and this is a great segue, because when I moved back to Minneapolis in December, Dirt, you and I went to a Monday Night Raw taping at the Target Center, and I can't remember how many people we ran into, but they all asked me, like, hey, you're back in the area, awesome, are you coming back to wrestling? The scene could really use you. And I took that obviously as a compliment that made me feel good. But then the more and more I talked to people, the more and more they told me that there are all these new wrestlers who just, I'm going to use the word wrestler very loosely, who just don't give a shit. And they don't care to get advice from other people. I could go right now and name probably less than 10 guys in this state or this area that I think are legit good pro wrestlers. But there's a lot of other fillers now. And I shouldn't say that, like, I don't mean that negatively, because there's a lot of new trainees through a couple different camps that I don't know who they are. But I feel like the talent nowadays, or at least in the last 5 years, they don't care to get advice from certain individuals. And if they do, it's kind of like, that guy's an old timer, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. I know kind of everything because this and that. I mean, I don't know how up to date you are with indie wrestling here, and I'm not going to be the first to tell you that I'm extremely up to date with it, because I have only been to a handful of shows since I've been back. But from what the guys tell me, what the boys tell me, there's a lot of trouble. And we could go back to even when you were actively wrestling on a full-time basis, and me too. We both saw it. There were guys that came in that didn't give a damn about whatever happened. They would do their match. They would go out in the crowd with their friends, play dress up every Saturday, Sunday, Friday, whatever it might be. What is the problem with professional wrestling, in your opinion, at least on the indie level?
No, I've complained about this for probably 10 years now. I just think there's I call it the treehouse club mentality. A bunch of guys who want to pretend be pro wrestlers. They want to hang out with all their buddies and do this little wrestling thing. It's not about trying to go to WWE. It's not about trying to go to Japan. It's not about trying to go to Mexico. It's not about trying to go to Europe or Puerto Rico or you name it. Anywhere outside of this little insulated world. And to me, pro wrestling is about getting out there and making some money. Pro wrestling is about expanding your horizons and expanding your knowledge and getting out there and really making a name for yourself everywhere. And if you're just comfortable just doing your 4 dates a month in your home state, I mean, that's fine. But I mean, to me, that's not being a pro wrestler. It's not being a pro wrestler.
How much fault do you place on promoters? Because I will be the first to admit I place a ton of fault on promoters who try to take shortcuts to fulfill a 5-match card, who will just pay. And it's not about money, because we talked about this with Ken Anderson, and we've all worked shows for $5 before, $10 before. Like when you're first breaking in, I get that. Or nothing. There's plenty of times where I didn't make a paycheck. But there are times where a promoter will tell me, we can't afford to bring in all these guys. What do you mean you can't afford to bring in all these guys? You can't afford to bring these guys because you're drawing 100 people. If you actually book guys who could work and you did a promotion, because it's called, you're a promoter for a reason.
If you're a legitimate promoter, I work at a bank. Give me a call. Let's do a loan for $700. Yeah. What do you want to do?
I mean,
if you want to build something, then put something into it. You're not going to have 75 people come and have it turn into something great in 3 years.
I agree. And I get,
cop-out.
If there's trainees and you want to bring them on, by all means, awesome. They need their spot too. But at the end of the day, if you have an opportunity to book a Horace, to book a Renny, to book a John Johnson, Arya Davari, Chris. I mean, I could go down the list. And for those of you who are not in Minnesota, just think of the good names in your states or in countries, wherever you're listening from. There are certain promoters who won't do that because they feel like on a consistent basis, we draw 130. 130 equals, times that by 10, $1,300. If I can keep my payroll at 400 or less, I'm walking away with a paycheck that should last me a couple weeks until my next show or whatever it might be. That, I believe, is the problem with pro wrestling, the fact that they just do what they think is good enough in their opinion. But it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something. I think that's very true, but I also think there's a lack of want from talent to take the opportunity to go somewhere and travel and work for next to no pay to expand their quote-unquote career. I don't think there's a lot of guys that want to do that.
Yeah.
And to me, then I kind of wonder why you're even wrestling. Because, again, to me, wrestling it's not about playing out just a fantasy or a dream, a childhood dream. It's once you're in there and you're putting your body on the line, you're putting your time on the line. I mean, don't you want to get a fair exchange back or something back on that input? I mean, I don't know.
From my perspective, I've never been in the back. I've never been with the boys, as you guys like to refer to them. I've never been backstage during these indie shows. From the way that both of you guys are talking about it, I feel like, have you guys ever had, I don't want to say throwdowns or coming to knuckles with somebody or disagreements or just raising your voices with people backstage that feel the way that you guys are talking about right now? You don't have to say names, but are there situations where you guys have felt backstage or after matches or before matches you're letting guys know exactly what you're talking about right now?
I've asked several guys over the years that I see some of the things that I just talked about, and I've straight out asked them, what are you doing in the business? Like, what are you trying to get out of it?
And when you said the word business, they were probably like, what do you mean business?
Exactly. And I can't tell you how many guys privately I've told that maybe they should get out after hearing their explanation of why they're in it. I once had a guy, I won't name names, but
we'll just call him Travis.
I asked him about the current product, just a very random generic question. And he said that he doesn't have time to watch wrestling.
Ugh.
And then I was dismayed and almost speechless, in which he then followed up with, I have other things going on in my life besides pro wrestling.
What are you doing on Mondays from 7 to 9:30?
And then I asked him, I said, so what the hell are you doing this for then?
Right.
Like, man, it's quite a physical, mental investment to do something that is not your first priority, your main priority.
I'm going to play devil's advocate to that real quick, Horace, because I have heard so many times guys who have been in the business 10, 12, 15 years also say those exact words. I don't watch Monday Night Raw. I don't watch SmackDown. And I'm thinking to myself, the same thing you just said. And these guys are my friends. And I'm thinking, what the fuck are you doing then? Like, are you doing this? You're not making a living doing pro wrestling on the indie scene unless you are one of the select few. You're just doing this because it's a good I guess, passing the time or what? Because, like, what I'm doing is I'm watching Mondays and I'm watching Fridays or Thursdays, not because I'm a mark. Well, I am. I'm a mark for pro wrestling. We all are.
We're all marks.
But because I want to be relevant for what they are looking for. Because at the end of the day, what I want to be is I want to be a WWE superstar or even, could be a TNA superstar, whatever it might be. But when those guys who are veterans, who I at this point look up to, say that I don't watch it, either I'm thinking A, you're full of shit, or B, what are you doing in the business? Now you've said this to rookies or green guys who don't have time to watch it. Your answer the same to the guys who've been in the business 10, 12 years who say the same thing to you?
I would say this: all three of us are NFL fans, right?
Yes.
Correct.
What do they always say about the best quarterbacks in the NFL? Play for the Packers. No, they do not play for the Packers. The correct answer is they spend hours and hours and hours and hours watching film.
Could you imagine if You got a Baltimore Ravens hat as we're talking.
Joe Flacco.
Could you imagine if Ray Lewis, Joe Flacco's third or fourth year in the league, if Ray Lewis would have had this conversation in the locker room and Joe Flacco would have said, I've never seen Tom Brady play before. I've never watched Peyton Manning. Like that, those are ridiculous answers, and that's what you guys are referring to with.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous to say, oh, I don't watch Monday Night Raw. I don't know what John Cena does. I don't know what whoever else on Monday Night Raw that people are impressed with week in and week out. No, I don't watch that. I just come on Saturdays from 7 to 9 o'clock and wrestle my 7-minute match and look like fucking shit and then leave for $60.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll give you $60 not to come.
True.
That's not true. I won't give you $60.
But yeah, that's the thing that I run into quite a bit. And it always disappointed me. It always made me upset because, and I follow you on Twitter, and everybody else should follow you on Twitter as well, obviously. And your Twitter handle, again, I should know this by heart, but like your Twitter and your Instagram are different. So
yeah,
what's your Twitter handle?
Twitter, Horace the Psycho, very original.
At Horace the Psycho.
At Horace the Psycho.
Instagram is at HTP.
It is HTP 916.
916. And they're going to get a lot of selfies on your Instagram. So, I mean, if you like that kind of thing, then get it.
You have to have a lot of pictures on Instagram because that's the only way your Instagram is credible.
Correct.
Because if people look at your Instagram and you only have 15 pictures, it looks suspect.
Very suspect. But that is great. Like, and I mean, I can, in my top of my head right now, I can think of a bunch of names who say that I don't watch this or that. And at the end of the day, again, I'm the same way. Like, if you don't watch it, okay, how are you ever going to get better? Like unless you're watching indie product and watching our matches and stealing that's cool. But most of the people who come to indie shows are watching what's on TV because they're familiar with the word wrestling or pro wrestling, so they know what they see on one because they're watching WWE. Let's not kid ourselves. They're not out there watching New Japan. The people who come to our shows, for the most part, will and always will watch WWE. They are the mecca of pro wrestling. So if you can watch them or watch NXT or whatever it might be and pick up a few things to get better, great. Because the only way I feel you'll ever get better is by practice, which there's not camps like there used to be.
True.
So film study, and I would watch Mid-South. I would watch old UWF stuff. I mean, I would watch stuff on VHS tape from the AWA just for ring psychology. I wouldn't replicate a match from those days anymore because I don't think that would work. But I mean, that's how I would try to get better, or I would pick your mind and say, hey, man, did you watch my match tonight? Because I think that's a lost art in pro wrestling, is for the young guy to go up to a veteran like a Horace the Psychopath, like say there's a Terry Funk or a Tommy Dreamer or somebody in the locker room. For somebody who's been in the business 1 or 2 years, for them to approach them, they are starstruck, which they should not be, because when you are in pro wrestling and you pay your dues, whether you pay a camp fee or you train, you're part of a family. And those guys, hopefully, are there to give back. Ask them questions. Why not? If you don't ask them questions, I feel like it's disrespectful not to ask them questions. If they didn't watch your match, they will tell you, I didn't watch your match. Unless you're Eddie Sharkey, then you'll say, the match was the best thing I've ever seen. And that's what he does.
Which you would never say that.
I mean, which is funny. But, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I went up to a guy like an Adam Pearce or, I mean, after certain matches with Heavy on Wrestling, like an Al Snow, like I would sit down and say, what did I do wrong? It's always the first question I asked. Were there a lot of guys over your course of your career that would approach you and say, whether or not you worked them that night or whether or not they asked you to watch their match, where they would be, Horace, what can I work on? I know I did, but I don't know how many guys actually went out of their way to do that with you or with anybody else.
Yeah, seldom. I mean, that's honest. That's the honest truth. I mean, most shows I've worked, I would suggest hardly ever does anybody ever actually come up and ask for a piece of advice. They will ask, how was my match? But the minute you don't say it was good or put it over, you can just see it in their eyes. They instantly tune you out.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be put over. They don't want to be taught anything.
That's rule number 1 in sales. Don't ask a closed-ended question. How was my match?
Absolutely.
It was awful.
Absolutely.
Later.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you don't really learn from being put over. I mean, you do, but you learn from all the advice you get from all the terrible things you do. And I can guarantee you Rennie's probably exactly like me, and I think all good pro wrestlers or anybody who views themselves as at least being a solid, you watch yourself on tape and you might see one or two things that you actually liked. And you spend the rest of the time watching cringing because there's 10 things that you did that you didn't do or that you could have done or you didn't do properly, and you just beat yourself up about it. And you can't wait to wrestle again because you want to fix all those mistakes. Then you wrestle, then you watch that tape, and you see 2 things you liked again and 10 things you didn't like. And it's an ongoing process, and that's just part of, again, going back to football, look at a Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning can go out and have a day where he throws 5 touchdown passes and throws for 450 yards, but all he'll talk about in his presser is about how he threw that pick in the third quarter with 2 minutes left when they were in the red zone, because that to him is way more impactful. It means way more to him than the 5 good things that he did, because that is how you become great.
Can we take a 5-minute football break?
Yeah,
we can do that. Okay, so you're bringing up football again. You walk in to the tank tonight here in Cottage Grove. You've got Baltimore Ravens on your head. You've got Baltimore Ravens sweatshirt on. You're obviously a football fan. What kind are you? Have you been a lifelong Baltimore fan? What brings the Ravens into my house tonight? I don't have that many Ravens fans walk in.
I used to be a huge college football guy and would watch a lot of college football in the late 90s.
Who was your team?
I really didn't have one. No, I mean, I would cheer for Notre Dame just based off of legacy. And obviously just the stadium from South Bend just looks amazing on TV. There's just everything about Notre Dame. And of course the Gophers, just being a resident, Minnesotan. But,
and you've lived in Minnesota for
my
your
entire
whole
life.
Okay.
My entire life. And
as we're talking about the Minnesota fandom of our guest this week,
we've been infiltrated.
Our roommate, our tank mate here, Lee Stork, brings out a Green Bay Packers pendant that has all the world championships listed on it. So there's a lot on there. I see about 9 to 10 championships on there. That's got to feel good for those Packer fans. But if you're listening, Packer fans, there is none of us sitting on this podcast right now, so you can turn it off if you'd like. 11, go on, Horace. 11 championships. I was corrected. But yes.
I know right now my Packer friends, Chris Jordan and Dysfunction, are thrilled beyond thrilled that the Packers have been represented on this podcast.
Let's end that quickly. So you're a Baltimore Ravens fan?
Yes, and as being a football fan of any of us, there's certain people that might stick out to you, and there happened to be a player. ESPN one night, it might have been like a Wednesday, Thursday game, I can't remember. There was this little white receiver, Brandon Stokely, who played for Louisiana Lafayette. And he had a killer game. It was just a random chance I was watching that night, and I was just like, oh, man, what a cool name and a good little receiver. And I don't know, just kind of always had in the back of my head. And I've always kind of been a lukewarm Viking supporter just growing up in the state, but I just never really felt a huge connection to the Vikings. It was a loose, fandom. And the Baltimore Ravens, I would kind of tuck it back in my mind. I was curious as to where Brandon Stokely would wind up. And the Baltimore Ravens drafted Brandon Stokely, and I, at that moment, was like, okay, that's my team. So
Brandon Stokely, I hope you're listening tonight. How many times has somebody told you they're a Baltimore Ravens fan because of Brandon Stokely? I didn't think that was going to be the name you were going to come up with.
Yeah, it's absolutely truth. He got me in, but then of course, Ray Lewis was already there, and so I mean, it's fun being a Ravens fan. I believe that they're a franchise that, from the front office down, they do the right things. They had a tough mid 2000, 2003 through 7, up until Joe Savior showed up.
I'm a Bears fan. We've had a lot worse years than that. 4 bad years isn't a bad string.
Yeah, so it's fun being a Ravens fan, and really competitive team, and I'm really, as over the years, becoming a Ravens fan. In a lot of ways, it really the team itself represents just a lot of the way I look at life. just their MO. The Ravens are just a very lunch pail,
blue collar.
Just a very just a very blue collar team. They're not fancy. They're not gonna blow you away with really super impressive game plans, but they just get the job done. And not only do they get the job done, they do it year after year for the most part. And consistency as a sports fan is big for me.
If you don't play with them, they probably hate you. But if they're a team you'd like to be on the same side of the old fence with them every week, I think.
You know, it's funny. He mentioned a team that was awful during the 2000s. I can think of a team that was awful during the 2000s and then eventually went to the Super Bowl, played against those fucking Ravens, and lost.
Who was that, Renny?
That was my team. And you know what we did next year? We stole Anquan Bolden. We stole him, and we still couldn't win a goddamn Super Bowl.
Anquan Bolden,
we
good
gave
player.
him to you, actually.
You gave him to us for nothing.
Basically.
A 6th-round pick.
Yes.
Nothing.
And then you pay your quarterback a whole lot of money, and he sucks.
It happens.
And that sucked, too, because Anquan Bolden was my second favorite Raven.
There have been wrestlers that made a lot of money that sucked. Let's not be crazy.
Name one.
Yeah, name one.
Okay. Okay. Tune him out. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back. We can continue the NFL conversation if we want to, but I want to get into more why you started in pro wrestling. Who was the guy that really said that you looked at and said, Jesus Christ, I want to be like him? And then we're gonna kind of move along further to what we're on to now. And I mean, you got a huge career, so we're going to do this as long as we can until you get sick of us and want to kick us to the curb. So let's take a little break. Let's take a little break, hear from our sponsors, maybe refill our beverages, Dirt, and we'll be right back.
None of them are alcoholic.
None. Zero.
Hey, Dave, what do you get when an atheist and a Christian start a podcast?
I don't know, Ken. What do you get when a Christian and an atheist start a podcast?
I don't know. You're the freaking comedian. I figured you'd have some kind of joke or something.
Right. Hi, I'm David Vox Mullen.
And I'm Mr. Anderson.
Seriously?
Wait for it. Just wait for it. Anderson.
And we're the hosts of Push the Button on the DVM Podcast Empire.
It's a show where we discuss religion, politics, and sex. All that stuff that we're not supposed to talk about.
I am a Christian.
And I'm an ordained minister with the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
I think that's code for he's an atheist.
And together, we tackle any and every hot-button issue that the world is scared to talk about.
Yeah, we're not afraid of the truth.
Yeah, we're not afraid to piss people off.
We're not afraid to push the button.
So find us on iTunes.
Or simply visit us online at dvmpe.com. And God willing, you'll come back for more.
Yeah, God willing. That's you took the words right out of my mouth, Dave.
What's up, guys? This is professional wrestler Renny D.
And this is Travis Dirty Mester.
We're the hosts of The Pencil, the professional wrestling podcast every Tuesday.
On iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher.
We bring you guests from the WWE, TNA, and all the major independent wrestling promotions around the world.
Follow us on Twitter at Pencil Podcast or on the World Wide Web, pencilpodcast.com.
The Pencil's kicking off the new year with their biggest podcast yet. On January 6th, we will officially kick off Destination Impact. We are available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. Find us online at pencilpodcast.com or follow us on Twitter at Pencil Podcast as we welcome former TNA World Heavyweight Champion,
Mr. Anderson!
We're coming back here. We're at the tank. We've got Horace the Psychopath here. We're going to call him Johnny throughout the old podcast today. But we're talking about football. We're talking about the Baltimore Ravens. Their tough loss against the Patriots.
Go Joe Flacco.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bad things that have happened to the Baltimore Ravens in the last 3 or 4 weeks with their loss and then the Patriots winning the Super Bowl. I'm sure that's not the first thing you want to talk about.
What?
Who won the Super Bowl?
When that happened?
Who won the Super Bowl?
I don't remember that.
I mean, the Patriots won, right?
The Patriots won.
We watched it together.
We did.
Where'd you watch it?
I watched it at a bar, and I sat back in the corner all by myself. It was awesome.
Did you have that Ravens hat on?
I did. I had a.
Did you have the same outfit on?
No, I did not. I did have a Ravens ball cap on, and everybody in the bar was cheering for the Seahawks, and there was me. Me and one other person rooting for the Patriots.
Hey, smart guy.
So, I mean, no, that didn't happen. That's right. I forgot about that.
So we had our break on the football 5, 6, 7 minute break, whatever we took there, against the better judgment of the Pencil Podcast listeners. I'm sure you want to hear us talk about wrestling. We'll talk about wrestling. So, do we want to talk about his beginning in wrestling? What do we want to talk about now?
I got into pro wrestling seeing Bret the Hitman Hart give his sunglasses, his shades, his whatever you want to call them to kids in the front row, and I wanted to be that fucking kid so bad and get those sunglasses. Who was your Bret Hart?
Well, I was already a big wrestling fan, but I did not have a Bret Hart until...
Were you watching wrestling was it WWF? Was it
AWA?
AWA, because you were in Minnesota. Okay.
But then, remember when they used to have the big, huge satellite dishes they put in your house? Like
in the backyards? Yeah.
I grew up in the country, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I use those things. I use those satellite dishes in my backyard wrestling days as a weapon. I would throw somebody's head off those big fucking things.
That's so dangerous. I don't want to hear about that.
But yeah, so you had a big satellite dish in your backyard.
A neighbor had a big satellite dish, but he also was a huge wrestling fan. So my dad talked him into wiring his satellite line from one house across to our house.
Folks, this was BitTorrent before BitTorrent was popular. This was pirating before pirating was a thing.
Like LimeWire, right?
Yeah, right.
This is the reason that we give our WWE Network passwords to all of our friends.
But,
don't tell anyone.
So my dad convinced him to do this, but the requirement for that was we had to watch what he wanted to watch. So he actually had to physically make up a TV schedule. So and it had to be agreed upon. Well, being that both my dad and our neighbor were huge wrestling fans, he had a wrestling schedule. So we watched all the wrestling the satellite would pick up. So on Monday nights, WWE had WWF at the time had wrestling from Madison Square Garden, 3 hours.
Yep.
Also got an hour-and-a-half show out of Dallas, World Class Championship Wrestling. Got that. There was a nightly lucha show on Saturday night from Mexico. There was a women's Japanese promotion that was on Saturday nights. Anyway, so I got to see a ton of wrestling weekly television shows way outside of the AWA. And at one point, even though I was a huge wrestling fan, there was... watching one of the TV episodes, it was Jerry the King Lawler against superstar Bill Dundee. And from the minute I saw Jerry the King Lawler, within 60 seconds of just seeing him physically and the presence he had and throwing the punches, for me, my Bret Hart was Jerry the King Lawler.
Which is awesome because those two, later in life, had one of the most riveting storylines in professional wrestling history. I don't care if anybody would disagree with me. The fact that Jerry Lawler would make fun of the Hart family, Stu, Keith, Bret, the whole family. You remember that?
Absolutely.
So, when you were watching Jerry do that, you were already probably in the business at this point, right? When Jerry was obviously... shitting on the Hart family on TV?
Yeah, because that was, 93?
It was early. 91, 92? It might have been 93.
Yeah, 93. Yeah.
Right. So, Jerry Lawler obviously is... And I think the guys nowadays, or the kids nowadays watching wrestling, they have no idea who or what Jerry Lawler actually was.
Absolutely.
And if you watch some of the tapes, and by some of the tapes, I mean, it's on a network because Jerry sold this tape to Vince. He was the most over guy in Memphis, the most over guy
in the entire Mid-South area, period.
They brought guys in for Jerry from other territories because Jerry was that big. And there was a match that stands out in my mind. It was a hair versus hair match. Jerry lost, had his head shaved, and the crowd went berserk.
Yep.
What was it about Jerry Lawler that really hit home with you?
I loved everything about his persona. Just from even just his body language, I just loved the way he stood in the ring. stood tall. He was a brawler. I mean, I've always gravitated towards the fisticuff guys. He was a kick, punch guy. The best punch in pro wrestling at the time, I couldn't tell you that because I wasn't in the business, but I knew that his punch looked more amazing than any other punch I'd ever seen in pro wrestling. He was one of the only pro wrestlers that had the single strap. He would fire up at the end of his matches and pull down the single strap, and like that in itself was like, holy shit, that's like so cool. And not being familiar with Memphis wrestling when I first discovered him, when he pulled on that strap, 17,000 people lost their friggin' mind.
It was like hulking up before hulking up was a thing.
Absolutely.
Have you met Jerry Lawler in person?
Well, and here's the thing. 13 months into the business, I wrestled Jerry Lawler multiple times.
How big is he? How tall is he? What's he stature-wise?
He's a shade under 6 foot in a legit, depending. I think there was a point where he was maybe down to about 220. He really leaned out the late 80s, but he mostly wrestled his career, I would suggest, at about 240. Not a physically imposing guy. He very much looks exactly like the sport that he very much looks like the typical softball guy.
Love softball.
Yeah, you're a softball guy, and his son Brian. Me and Brian had roomed a couple times when I wrestled in Memphis. Brian had told me that his dad was very much just like the majority of us. Really didn't work out a lot.
Does Jerry drink beer?
No, he doesn't do drugs and he doesn't drink.
Good for him. That makes.
However, as Brian explained to me, I never got to personally see it, but Jerry's big thing of it is he's just a big burger guy and would go to fast food a lot, and that was his thing. And
I mean, he was in Memphis,
yeah,
the king of barbecue. What are you gonna do?
And when you're in Memphis, you're not that far away from Nashville. You're not that far from Nashville, and I'm a country music. I got a goddamn Garth Brooks T-shirt on as we're doing this podcast.
So let me ask you a question. Your role model, your Bret Hart per se, was Jerry the King Lawler. When that promoter calls you or tells you the day of, Horace, tonight you're working Jerry Lawler. Mark out moment?
Quietly, internally a mark out moment. But again, I think that's where the separator becomes, are you a mark? We're all marks, but are you a mark, or are you a pro wrestler? Because the professional in you does not mark out for anybody you wrestle. That's when the professional side of you has to treat it like this is a business partner. We are now doing business together. Yes, quietly again in your head, when you're in the ring, of course, when I was in the ring with Jerry Lawler and I'm beating on him, I was like, I was like, holy shit. I'm beating down on Jerry the King Lawler. I am punching him and I'm kicking him. And not only that, later on, I'm taking a pile driver in this match, which is the coolest thing ever. But again, you can in no way portray that in the ring. And especially afterwards, it would be unprofessional, in my opinion, to dote on somebody you just worked, because you're in the same business doing the same thing no matter what level you're at. But yes, you say thank you as if you've done it a million times. And then you take the drive home talking to your best wrestling buddy going, holy shit, I just wrestled my idol, Jerry the King Lawler, which, of course, I did for the next I've been doing it for 20 years. So
working now here in my – so that would be the equivalent of me working Bret, or internet wrestling community. You can rip me apart for this, working The Rock, because he was – my all-time, to this day, he's still my idol. He's my role model. He's the guy.
Rock is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely, because he's got everything.
He's got a great
down.
body.
Body. I mean, he's an entertainer. He wasn't an awful worker, but I mean,
he shouldn't have came to the Rumble. That was a mistake this year.
That's a story for a different day. But did you take a chance, whether it be match 1, match 5, to sit down with Jerry, whether it be at a Denny's, in the locker room, whatever it might be, to say, Jerry, what can I do to be better?
When I worked for Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler's USWA, the wrestlers, because it still was the end of old school, they would come to you and tell you what they wanted you to work on or learn or know. So there really wasn't a real opportunity to go up to a Jerry Lawler and talk to him. And I think a lot of people would tell you this, at least back in the time. Jerry's a very reclusive guy. He kind of really sticks to himself. He's not sitting,
we're talking Jerry Lawler.
Jerry the King Lawler. He's
Right.
not sitting in the locker room typically with the rest of the boys. He's got his own locker room. And he's not a diva. He's the man.
Especially at that point. 'Cause,
Exactly.
I mean, at that time, he was still Jerry the King. I mean, he was still the man in pro wrestling.
Yep.
Let's not confuse it with the Jerry Lawler we see nowadays, who should still be the man.
Absolutely.
Because he sits behind a microphone on, I guess now Thursdays, does not take anything away from what he has done.
Right, absolutely. And at the time when I was there, that was his first year of being with Stacey Carter. They had not yet been married yet.
Miss Kitty, Stacey Carter.
Absolutely. So they, when you did see Lawler, he usually was with Stacey, so it seemed a little just human nature unpolite to go up and interrupt the conversation.
Were you jealous?
No.
I would have been. I would have been.
No, I was more careful. Like, I was very aware that she was with Jerry. There were many times Stacey was by herself, and she would chat me up, and she was always very friendly and very nice. But you always have that in the back of your head that you're talking to the boss's girl, and you better keep things as polite and as innocent as possible.
That's why nobody that works for WWE would ever try anything with Stephanie.
And before I let you continue, for those listeners who are younger, who have the network, USWA was a big deal.
USWA was the NXT of the Mid-South region.
If you Google Rocky Maivia, The Rock, whoever, I mean, Flex Cavana had his career set out in USWA, and watch some of his promos. They're great, but that was because Jerry Lawler could see talent. He recruited talent. He had the best talent come to USWA, and I am in awe. I am jealous sitting here with you right now for the fact that on your wrestling resume, you have USWA, and you worked the king of pro wrestling.
Absolutely.
And no pun intended, but he was the king of professional wrestling.
To verify, for somebody like me, somebody that might not know as much about USWA, are we saying that Jerry the King Lawler was a wrestler and he also was running the company and he
co-owner?
So he decided the talent that came in. He decided who was there, the cards that he was involved in, all that kind of stuff.
It was him
at that
and
point.
Jerry Jarrett. You said right.
Him and Jerry Jarrett own USWA. However, the booker changed often in USWA. The normal formula was Lawler would have the book for 6 months, meaning he would book all the TV.
And he was still an active wrestler
absolutely,
at this time.
Yep. He would book all the TV. He would book all the arena shows and then also perform. And then after 6 months, Jerry Jarrett would take over the book. And, of course, Lawler, obviously being co-owner, would always have his fingers in the overall product. But everything underneath, probably what he did, would then go to a new booker. And then, Eric Embry booked there for a time. Eddie Gilbert booked there for a time. There were several guys in between Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler that had the book, but primarily the territory was booked by Lawler and Jarrett at different times.
I am just sitting here, like, in my own little personal space, marking out a little bit for different reasons. One, Jerry Lawler, again, I cannot stress enough how important he was to the world of professional wrestling. Two, Jerry Jarrett, who, for those of you who don't know, I mean, that family has been in professional wrestling for the longest time. And we just had Jeff Jarrett on last week.
I love Jeff.
And did you
know he lives in Nashville? That's awesome. I'm sorry for bringing it up again, but my God, that's awesome.
And I want to get back to Lawler in a second, but was Jeff involved in USWA
Jeff
at that
Jarrett
point?
was an active wrestler. I believe he was in year 2 or 3 because I think he got in the industry when he was maybe 16. I could be wrong about that, but he was
the best wrestlers get in the business when they're 16.
Yep. But
right,
he was a couple years in at that point. I think me and Jeff are separated by a year. He's a year older than me. So when I went to Memphis, I was 19. So Jeff was either 20 or 21. I don't know. My math's a little fuzzy, but he was not much older than I was. And actually, Jeff, to a great deal more than probably anybody there. The Moondogs. I rode a lot with the Moondogs, but the Moondogs and Jeff Jarrett more than anything were the the talents that would come and talk to me on their own free will and try to give me advice. Which Jeff's advice to me all the time was get in the gym.
Jarrett's advice was okay.
Did he have the guitar at this point?
He did not.
Little early.
This was pre Double J.
All right, so we don't. It's not Double J.
This was pre Double J, and this was also pre Lawler going and working for WWE.
So, I mean, okay. So there are so many questions stem from this conversation to the point where how much do you miss the territories? How much do you miss the strong-armed promoters like a Jerry Jarrett, like a Jerry the King Lawler? Because the promoters now, there's no territories. There is not one promoter that I can, and no disrespect to anybody running shows right now, but if you want to run a successful promotion, you need to have the balls, and you need to put your foot down for certain things, like a Jerry Jarrett, like a Jerry Lawler. What was the best piece of advice that you received from working that territory, you're 13 months in, man.
Yep.
13 months
13
in.
months.
I'm 13 months in. I'm working shit indies in Wisconsin.
Right.
You know, like, I mean,
I was at those shows. They weren't that shit.
They were shit. They were complete. The shows that I were working were garbage. And some of the shows that I worked later on in my life were garbage. Every show that you worked meant something because
Absolutely.
Those people believed that this was a legitimate. It was like Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield. People still at this point. This is before kayfabe became an open door policy.
Absolutely, it was the tail end of kayfabe.
What did you? I mean, I could ask you what you learned, and you could give me a book.
Absolutely,
you could write me a book.
hundreds of lessons.
But what was the one thing from that time that today still sticks with you in your head that you could sit there and tell Travis, that you could tell me, that you could tell any new professional wrestler, any green kid in the business that you received from whether it be Jerry Jarrett or Jerry Lawler at that point?
I will say that it's a one gigantic answer for all the little answers. Listen to your booker, listen to your boss,
and
listen to the vets, listen to the fans.
Boom.
And a lot of that nobody really had to tell you, but that was the main thing. Listen, learn, listen, learn, listen, learn. That's all it was. I mean, and every night you got a little bit better because you kept your mouth shut and you recognized what your position was, and that the only thing that could happen by talking was bad things. When you're quiet and you just do as you're told and you do as what's being taught to you, funny, you get better.
You've gone into a little bit of description of some of the situations you've gone through, and now you just mentioned how listening was so important. Listening to the booker, listening to the promoter, listening to whoever you're wrestling, I'm sure was important. But the one that I take away is listening to the fans. How much and how much do you take from them during a match or before a match when you're coming out for your entrance, or you're coming out, or you're thinking about the last match, how things ended whenever you left the ring? How much do the fan reaction affect what you do in the ring the next time you get in the ring, or how slowly or fastly you do certain things?
100%. I mean, everything is your audience, and that's why I always have a problem with guys who have matches planned A through Z. Is that there's nights you might sit in the back and you might have come up with in your head, in your mind,
it's an A+ match, right? It's a goddamn 5-star.
We got a show stealer, and you come out there and you realize from hearing the reaction to you and from hearing the reaction of the opponent and maybe hearing the reaction of the show earlier, these people don't give a shit. So then that's when you have to start tweaking it. Do we want to try to do this in our mind A+ match, or do we have to do something else? And of course, it's an easy answer. You start doing whatever is going to get you a reaction. Some nights you might not get a reaction no matter what you do, and that just happens. But you have to be able to learn to improvise. I always say that pro wrestling to me is sports improvisation theater. you have to be able to improv, because the great pro wrestlers are all the greatest improv, quote unquote, actors. I hate that word, but they're improv guys, and that the best are the best are the improv guys.
My biggest question to guys who have been in the ring is, I watch Raw, I watch SmackDown, I see what's happening on TV, and that to me is entertainment every week until they get to that fourth week where you're setting up for that pay-per-view or you're setting up for that show, and the show that actually matters. We've got 12 pay-per-views a month. 12 pay-per-views a year, excuse me. 12 pay-per-views a month would be too many. That would be overkill, I think. But from my perspective, the pay-per-views that I've been in attendance for, the pay-per-views that I've watched on TV, are basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, for me as a fan, they are one match with 6 of them included from beginning to end. You want to bring them up, you want to take them down. You want to bring them up, you want to take them down. How much as a pro wrestler is your match, the way that you start and end it, or the way that you start and have the middle of it, indicated by what happens in the match that is previous to you on the card? Because if the crowd's dead or the crowd is going crazy, does that affect the way that you go into your match? Or is there some times where you need to change something? Hey, 3 minutes before our match, the end of that match before us was so good, we need something to change to make sure that we don't kill the crowd before we need to get into our good stuff.
Before you answer, Horace, I just want to add to this. One big problem, I think, with a lot of shows that we're on is that, say you and I, Horace and I, are up next, and I think we've done a good job of this. We know we have a match coming up next. We would take the time to watch the matches previous to us, because if we just saw a certain finish, a certain comedy match, a certain style of match, the last thing that Horace and I want to do is to replicate what we had just saw. So I will say it is absolutely everything and importance, and that's what kind of brings in a good promoter as well. I mean, assuming they're a promoter, to prevent a duplicate from happening. Does that happen every time? No, unless you are good at the business. And there have been times where I think you and I maybe are into, hey man, we're up 4th tonight or 5th, and maybe we don't catch every single match, but somebody comes back through the curtain and say, hey, we asked them how it went, and they said it was great, we did this and this and this, and we were thinking, okay, but we need that feedback, because the last thing that you and I want to go do is, all right, match 3 and 4 both did a roll-up finish. If we do a roll-up finish in match 5, what are we doing? I mean, the whole show from match 1, the curtain jerk match, to the main event should make sense. Like WrestleMania last year, like we talked with Ken Anderson, he said it brought him up, brought him down, brought him up, brought him down, brought him up.
I've never thought of it like that until Ken explained it to me, and that's why I bring it up to you, because the show in itself needs to be in line. That's what I'm asking. If you've experienced that backstage prior to a match and had to change things or enhance things because of the way things go before your match.
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching on what you just said, every match should tell a story, and the entire night should tell a story. There's things that you shouldn't do in match 2 and match 3 because you have matches 5, 6, and 7. So yeah, so a lot of it is really thinking about what's later in the show. If I work Renny, we can look at that lineup and kind of have an idea of what we think those guys are going to do. And if we have any questions, you probably are best to go up to somebody and say, hey, what kind of thing are you guys going to do out there?
Normally, do you know what the guys are going to do in the matches before you, or is that something you need to ask them prior to?
I would say that 80% of the time, I would say that, if you follow it, and you keep paying attention to your own product, you kind of have an idea of what you think the guys are going to give you. And if there are, if there's new guys on the show or a new matchup that maybe 2 guys haven't worked, then at that point, I know I've several times have went up to guys and said, hey, what type of match are you guys going to do? This, that, and the other thing. If maybe, again, if me and Renny had planned out to have this, in our mind, epic 18-minute brawl. And guess what? Match 2, they've decided they're going to brawl, and we're match 4. Maybe we're not going to have a brawling match. Or maybe at that point we've decided or need to figure out how to make our brawling match better than match 2 brawling match. And again, match 2 should not be a brawling match, by the way, but just
we'll get into that after our next break, I'm sure.
Okay, so this is Leroy chiming in.
Leroy.
So question: is there times when you go home from shows when you're disappointed, upset because you couldn't show what you wanted to show because of the order that you were in? Did you know what I mean, kind of?
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you say, and I hear it a lot from other guys, but I've always taken my spot on the card. All I can fairly critique about my spot and my situation is, what was the intent of my spot? If I'm match 2 and they want me to give 8 minutes, I want to be content with the match 2 8-minute match. And even though maybe 5 other matches were way better than what I did, that's not me. I'm just doing my 8-minute match and doing what the promoter has asked me to do. And if I do that to the best of my ability, I go home that night going, I did my job. That's what they wanted me to do.
And you're doing it for the fans, and you also know there is next week, there is tomorrow, so that helps too.
Everybody on a show can't steal the show. I think there's a mentality, and I hate it, on indie wrestling. I feel like it's, getting a little over-exaggerated, but it's an epidemic of this idea of we need to have the best match. No, you don't, because there's only going to be one match of the night.
There is that epidemic on Raw every week. There's that epidemic on every dirt sheet I can find that wants every wrestler to have the match of the night every night.
They want the internet wrestling community wants every match on the card to try to outdo the others. And I'm not saying as a wrestler you don't go into that with that mindset. When you and I worked, Horace, we thought we know we have a place on this card. But at the end of the day, at least I thought, I still wanted to outdo every fucking buddy else before me, and I want to make sure that we make a point in our match to set a standard. If we're 5th and there's 2 more matches after us, I want 6 and 7 to work their ass off to do better than what we just did. But I also don't want to go out there and do everything in the book, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, the opening match should start the show hot. The match before intermission, because in independent wrestling, you always have an intermission. The match before intermission should be a tame main event, I guess, ish. But at the end of the day, the main event should be the most important match of the card due to what the promoter booked. Now, there are a lot of times in indie wrestling where match 1, match 2, match 3 try to steal the show. I'm torn because I've been in those matches before, and I've had that mindset where I'm just like, I want to go out there at match 2 and make sure that I have the best match of the card. But what's more important, your singles match or the show in its entirety? Because the show in its entirety should be a story.
You asked a million questions with about 6 words right there. What's more important, your individual match or the product itself? And
if you're trying out for WWE, it's your individual match. If you're putting together an independent wrestling show, I believe that you should work towards the betterment of the show, because you want those people to come back next month or 2 weeks. But again, we have egos as pro wrestlers.
No.
I mean, we are drama kings and queens.
No, that's not true.
But I'm actually interested in yours, because I think you and I have the same mindset in a lot of things when it comes to pro wrestling, and we've had great matches before that we've both been very happy about. But when we go out there, or you go out there, are you thinking about the entire show as a complete story? Or are you thinking about, not necessarily I want to get my shit in, but I want to have a memorable match. Because it's a tough predicament to be in sometimes as a worker, as a wrestler.
I want to have the most memorable match within the time frame that I'm given. If I'm only given 6 minutes, I can't have the
But do you want to seal the show, or do you want to be your place on the card? Because I honestly think this is one of the toughest questions as a wrestler on a card to answer. Because if you look at the lineup sheet and you say, Renny D and Horace the Psychopath are match 4. And in match 7, there is Wrestler X versus Wrestler Y. Do you and I look at each other and say, let's fucking take this show? Or do you and I already know the answer to this, but or do you and I sit there and say, let's do what we need to do to make sure that the show makes sense, and that way when people leave tonight, they remember that Renny D and Horace the Psychopath had a good match. But that main event was the reason that they're coming back next month.
The main event should be the best match of the night.
Thank you. It's a very simple answer, and it is hard. It's even hard for me. Like when I look at the lineup sheet and I see that Renny D and Horace the Psychopath are working tonight, right away my mind's like, boom. Horace is a fantastic wrestler, fantastic worker. I know I can hold my own. We could be the main event. You and I could easily be the main event, and we could do whatever the hell we wanted to do and make sure whatever we did in that match, people next month came back wanting to see Renny Horace 2 or the repercussions of what we just did. But we are professionals, and we need to know, and you need to check your ego at the door, I think. And I think that's a problem sometimes in pro wrestling, and I've seen it, and you've seen it numerous times where the opening match or match 2 will do everything in the book. They will go out to the ring, they will do dive spots, they will do chair shots, they will do whatever it is, and then how is the rest of the show supposed to follow certain things like that? And there are ways to do it.
I think a big thing, too, and I've said this for a long time, most fans really only remember maybe 3 things from each match. Maybe.
Yeah.
So think about that. You have 7 matches. They might be able to remember 20 things that happened over 3 hours. So if they're only going to remember 3 things that you do during your given time, why would you try to give them 25 things to remember?
Let me ask you this. From an outsider perspective, I don't know a lot of how things get set up and stuff. But is there, let's say you spoke earlier on how your dad played a huge role in growing up in wrestling. Let's say your dad doesn't get to come to many matches, and your dad is coming to your match tonight. Okay,
he's throwing a great little boomerang in the twist here.
Or for you, Renny D. I remember one match in lacrosse where we had a whole group of our friends that we grew up with was able to come and watch you. Do you have any leniency in hey, my buddies are coming, can I do a little extra? Can I do a little more? Can it be a little bigger match for me? Do you have any leniency in that, or is that asking too much?
I'm gonna throw this one to you because this is actually a tough one. I mean, it's a great question, Lee, and I appreciate you asking that because it does change the mindset for me, especially when I have 12 friends from high school or 12 friends who my entire life said, hey, you do that pro wrestling shit. You do that fake pro wrestling shit. And I want to go out there and say, I don't do that fake pro wrestling shit. I am so good at this that I should be on TV every Monday and Thursday.
Right, and because I can tell you this from an outsider's perspective, growing up, you have your groups of your jock groups, your other groups that you hear, professional wrestling, okay, that's your backyard, funny, fun, but do you obviously you want to prove to them, man, I'm something. You know what I mean?
There's a special line, right? I mean, what do you think, Horace? Like, if your dad or your longtime friends come to a show for the first time in a long time, and you're match 3,
you got to get jacked up.
You're jacked up. I mean, you're absolutely jacked up. There's no doubt about it in your mind that you're jacked up, and you want to have the best match possible. But at the end of the day, you are paid to do your spot on the show. You are. I mean, here's my takeaway before I throw it to you. I love you guys being at the shows. But will you guys be there next month?
Right. No,
and that is the toughest thing because these guys are going to talk about this for the next 4 weeks. I need to go out there and do everything in the book and steal the show. And I want you guys to talk about me on Facebook and Twitter and whatever social media aspect you guys have. But at the end of the day, it's still more important for those people who are going to come back next month because you guys aren't coming back next month.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It's one of those. It's like a double-edged sword, right? Like
I don't think there's a wrong answer in that situation. I mean, I can see both sides of it. For me, I go back to, and I'm boring with this answer, but I'm just gonna do what they've asked me to do.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, if I'm only given 8 minutes, you're gonna get my 8 best minutes,
Right.
but that 8 best minutes might not be the most impressive because 8 minutes isn't a whole lot of time to really kill it.
And that's the difference between an outsider perspective and someone who is a professional, like these guys are, that do it in and out every week, and they do it for the fans.
And I will say, side note, and this is honest to God truth, I've never even told you this, Renny. I have wrestled for an audience of one only once, and that is when I wrestled you at Battleground because Scarlett Bordeaux was there.
Yeah, baby.
And I've always had a crush on the little Miss Scarlett, and I really did want to kill it that night, only because she was there, and that's not some sort of creeper type thing, but I really did go into that match going, I really want to do well because Scarlett's here. Well, only time I've ever done it.
On that note, I mean, we are as far as like an episode time frame, we're kind of rolling up. Are you cool with like sticking around for another episode?
Absolutely.
Because there was another guy who marked out for you in the Blue Mini at a Heavy on Wrestling show. He tweeted about you and said like after the Jerry Lynn retirement show, he was marking out about your match, specifically you. And I don't know if you read the tweets from him, but I want to get into this, and I think we have enough to go another hour next week with you, if you're cool with that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this. Let's wrap up this episode. Let's come back, and there's a bunch more we can talk about with Horace the Psychopath. As always, I'm the one and only Renny D, and I mean, you can take that for what it's worth, but we're at Pencil Podcast on Twitter, at Pencil Podcast on Instagram, / Pencil Podcast on Facebook, pencilpodcast.com. Dirt is at Travis Messer. I'm at Real Renny D, at Horace the Psycho on Twitter. We're going to come back in with you next week. We have a lot more to talk about, including the Jerry Lynn retirement show. A lot more to talk about with you. People are asking questions. Where have you been? What have you been doing? And if you want to know that this episode...
Taking selfies.
Instagram is where it's at.
Strap in, strap up, and I don't condone that ever. But hold on. Next week, we're going to come back with Horace a little bit more. Just do us a favor. Subscribe, rate, review, iTunes, share us on social media. We'll be back next week.